Okay, there we go. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for making the time today, especially across so many time zones. So thank y'all for doing that. And for all the people that one or more of us have already connected with, thank you for all that previous time as well. So just to get us organized, my name is Rachna Kare. I'm the executive director of DIA in Houston. For those of you who I haven't met, it's so nice to meet you. I wish we were in a space and with longer time to where we could do like, yes, actual in-person hugs one day. Hopefully I see Aparna doing it. And of course have more time to get to know each other, which we will, and is one of the major points of today's call. But we wanted to give it to you guys in an hour and just really do a quick info session for those of you who are just learning about the project. So for many of you who are on this call, you are aware that all of our organizations, or the majority of them, were part of the SOAR group, which is the South Asian Women's Organizations. And for many, many years, as we all know, there has been talks and attempts to formalize this, make it more structured, have more power behind it, because we all know that we're so much stronger when we work together. So when the pandemic started, Kavitha, Aparna, Navneet, and I, and also to some extent Neha as well from Upnagar in Chicago, and she's not able to make it today. But we started to talk like during our commute hours, I would say. It was these kind of for some of us early morning calls, and we just started to dream about what could be possible. And we said, like, while we're here, stuck at home in this pandemic, let's do some big dreaming and think about how we can make that formalization happen. And so with that, we started to put some pen to paper around the idea of South Asian SOAR, which is South Asian Survivors and Organizations in Alliance and Rising. And so that's what today's call is about. Most of you all have heard from me already, or from one of us, and we've had kind of a one-on-one about why I think it's super important that that your organization get on board and join. And so with that, we wanted to actually record and make sure that we were able to give everybody all of the thought process and background that we've done. But of course, it's very unfinished, and that is because we want to hear from you all as potential members on what the needs are and how we can create a stronger collaboration together. So I did a quick introduction. I'm Rachna, and I'm going to let the others who are on what we're calling the steering committee introduce themselves too. So I'll pass it to Aparna, who's right next to me.
Yeah, and just a shout out to Veda and Amrita, who have also been a part of these calls, the brainstorming, and keeping us kind of focused and creating even like the beautiful words that we put together. They're also part of this morning meetings and make sure we acknowledge all their amazing work and coming together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Amrita is going to be walking us through a major chunk of this. But I do want to give her props because I thought 7 a.m. was early for me. And then I realized she's on the West Coast. So I don't even want to do that math. But for those of you who don't know Aparna, I'll let you introduce yourself. But
Yeah, so my name is Aparna Bhattacharya. I am the executive director of Raksha in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah, that's who I am. Some of you I have known for many years, and I see a lot of new faces. So I'm excited to see all these new folks that are in this work. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Are we gonna do screens, or am I presenting without the screens?
I think Amrita is going to share screens, but I'm going to let Kavitha and Navneet introduce too.
Hi, I'm Kavita. I'm the executive director of Seki. Thank you all for joining. This is like, I cannot believe how many people are on this call. It is amazing. I'm going to pass it along to Veda, and I want to echo what everybody's already said. Veda and Amrita have been really critical to this process and have been real drivers. So it's been really a pleasure working with them on the steering committee for this.
Hi, I'm Navneet Bala, and I'm the executive director at Manavi, and very, very excited to see you all here. Some new faces, some old faces. So excited to be working with everyone here.
And Bela, can we get you to introduce yourself too? Sorry, I see you now.
Sorry. Hi. Yeah. I'm Veda. I'm the senior comms associate at Saki. I think I came onto this project in the fall, kind of dove into all of the great work that Amrita and the steering committee have been putting together. And it's been really exciting and fun. It's been so wonderful just to get to know everybody in this group and learn more about what's happening across the nation in this space. So I'm really excited to be a part of it and excited to get to know all of you. And I'll pass to Amrita, who's key organizer here.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Amrita. I'm acting as a facilitator and I think consulting in some ways with the steering committee to really get us aligned and thinking about what SOAR is and what it could be. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And Aparna is going to kick it off with sharing a little bit about how we got here.
Definitely. So welcome. And you know, our story comes from the social justice movement of our communities, wherever our communities are, because we're all over the place, wherever the South Asian diaspora is. And it's fueled by grassroots efforts by South Asians who want to make change. So we're known for wanting to make change, whether it's here in the United States or in, you know, the places where our ancestors are from. But we know that we have a long history of fighting for what's right and trying to make change. We can go to the next slide. And when we talk about our movement, I think the one thing to know is of that we've got, you know, what, 28 to 35 organizations that we formally know are doing this work. And you know, throughout the years, because I'm the one who's probably been in the ED role the longest, we've had a long history of coming together and making change, and that could be anything from helping get that H4 EAD relief for many of the survivors to having unified statements when there has been a murder suicide or a high profile case. And we've also just been huge in supporting each other in our growth. I think about even Raksha's history, right? When Raksha started, we looked to Manavi Saki Apnagar to kind of create our own organization, but we needed our sisterhood, and our sisterhood or our family or our sense of family has been a critical voice. And so our goal is to really, you know, make the story of South Asian survivors real, to make sure that the laws that come into place will impact us, build our capacity as organizations to be the most powerful organizations and survivors and advocates as we can be, and then look really deep at what our work needs and change our culture collectively. I think what we know is that when we do it together, we're going to have a whole lot more impact. We can go to the next slide. And to give a little bit of a history, and we're working a little bit more of the history, is that the South Asian feminist movement here was the catalyst for, you know, many of our organizations that are sitting here. And so it's important that, you know, we have that voice, but it built the foundation for a lot of the gender justice movement, but also for South Asian activism overall. We were kind of in the beginning of doing a lot of this stuff, and then I think it's sprung off, and it was like the 70s and 80s when many of the folks who started many of our organizations started coming together and talking about what we can do. And I think that did was lead to the gender justice work that many of our organizations do. Now, traditionally, I know we have called ourselves South Asian Women's Organizations. We've identified as SAWOs, and I think one of the things that we need to do is, as we're doing this work, we need to make change, right? Because we know not all survivors are women, and we are engaging in some deep work, and so that's part of where, in keeping with our legacy and doing this work, that we're going to change and adapt to our changing communities and become more welcoming to the gender identities in our communities, the intersectional practices, and working to be anti-racist and working anti-oppression, because we've had a lot of dialogues that are happening in our community, and so that's part of what we want SOAR to be and where we want to go. Am I missing anything? And for those of you who don't know, I'm just going to give the quick history. There's been many times where we've come together, whether it's at a Rohan or other statements, that's where we realized how amazing it is that we developed amazing friendships and and been able to help each other sustain and grow and learn from each other. So Amrita, I think you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that story. So I think a lot of the last 6 months were spent talking through that and thinking about, well, then what are the strengths and the gaps in that sort of movement and where we are now have been. And that's where we came to what we'll share now, which is really what SOAR is made of. And SOAR, again, stands for Survivors and Organizations in Alliance and Rising. So again, through a lot of deep work with the group that was mentioned earlier, we put our minds together and came up with this vision statement. So I'll give you all a second to read it if you haven't seen it before. And what we're really aiming for here is to paint the picture of this future world and this culture that we envision. And we kind of made the intentional decision not to include sort of negative words and really focus on the affirmative or the positive and the vision that we want to see. In terms of our mission and the work we want to do, it's our collective is guided by survivor realities across the South Asian diaspora to build power and resilience, to unify our voice, ignite change in our communities, and advocate for equitable and alternative paths to justice. And again, I think the mission came from a lot of like, what is it that we just genuinely need? What does each organization, the steering committee, feel like we need? And also we ran this by a larger group who then gave input, and then we reshaped the statement. Great. And then moving further along from taking our mission and vision, we went to, well, then what does that look like? Like, what are the things that we value and what's important to us? And we came up with these 6 statements. So really focusing on surviving center needs and realities. So we center survivors' needs and realities in our movement. We approach our work from an intersectional perspective. So I think that really goes to what Aparna was just describing for us. We uplift each other through compassionate collaboration and accountability, a little bit more of how we want to work with each other. Along with, we create space for honesty and move forward with solidarity. And Rachna will show us where the full descriptions of these live, but for this specific one, I think we wanted to be intentional about creating space to reflect on the past and then move forward together. Grounding ourselves in love and respect, and then ultimately arriving and taking sort of our vision with an approach of imagination and innovation. Okay, so then we get to what is joining SOAR? What are we actually going to do, and why are we all here? We believe that as members of SOAR, we can together expand our capacity to create thoughtful and innovative survivor-centered solutions for addressing and preventing violence. And so to the right, you can see some of the ways that we've identified areas of focus. And that's again, through some of that work we did initially to think about the strengths and the gaps and the needs. So really focusing on survivor leadership and organizational leadership, thinking about what's the voice in policy and advocacy, really digging deep into capacity building and resource sharing and the different sizes of our organizations, the different nature, and how can we lean on each other. And then leveraging sort of the space to come together to then develop national data, probably national storytelling as well, and using that to get national funding that can then either be put towards, and I think that's our next slide exactly. So really thinking about how do we distribute funds to do the work for SOAR and the movement that it can, or the work that it can kind of take central hold of, and then also each member organization. So here's an example of maybe what year 1 to 3 would look like. And it's not set in stone, but it's some of the brainstorming we've been doing around the areas of focus that we've identified. So I'm not really going to dig into these, but I just wanted to dig into year 1 especially. Really a focus will be onboarding our members and our board, incorporating as a 501c3. thinking about what are the right staff to bring on board and then hiring them, and then focusing on that national data and then national resources as well. And lastly, I just wanted to talk quickly about this idea of hiring staff. I know that's something that the group has discussed about. We have these bold ambitions. The thing that often holds us back is not having the capacity and momentum to move forward. And so thinking through that, we thought really having a staff for SOAR is probably the right way to go, and making sure we don't lose the momentum we have and we're able to carry out on the vision and mission that we set forth. Okay, so before I go any forward, are there any questions that anyone has about the mission, vision, principles, approach? I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts. And if not, feel free to chat them in. I'm quickly going to unshare, and then we'd love to show our website to you.
So is that a question about membership rules? I saw in chat.
I think so.
Nita, you were asking about membership rules. I think we have more guidelines about just engaging, and I think Rachna can talk about that as she goes through the application.
Yeah, I'll go through the application right after we look at this beautiful website.
Okay, so southasiansoar.org, that's the website. I'll send it in the chat too, or maybe, yeah, I'll send it in the chat after I go through. But really just has all the things we just went through, our vision, our mission. You can also access the application from here. We have our about, so a larger form version of the origin story that Aparna just walked us through, and then our guiding principles as well. And then lastly, we have this sort of draft page of members, but we hope that we can build this out with everyone who does apply. So we look forward to seeing logos and bios here and more of them in the next month. That's about it for the website. So Rachna, I'm gonna pass it over to you to share the application.
Man, after all these months of Zoom, I'm still keeping myself on mute. That's a rookie move. Let me just pull this up very quickly. And I want to say that many of you, I think 13 organizations have already filled out their membership application. And that's awesome. And I see, I think most of them here today. So for you all, this is just, a reminder. But for everyone else, I'm going to walk you through the membership application. And as I'm doing that, feel free to just interrupt me with questions if you have any. And here's where, yeah, Bushra, yes, we'll get into that as well. Here's where we, if I can have, Amrita, can you watch the chat while I'm sharing so that you can also interrupt me with questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, can everyone see the application? We good? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thank you. Otherwise, you're looking at my desktop, which is not as interesting. So as you'll see, we have 12 people who have, 12 organizations that have already applied, which is exciting and so great. So when you go to the link, it's a Google form, and we're going to be asking you, of course, the basics. So the organization name, your mission or a description of your organization. And the reason here is because this is what will live on the website when you all join. So we'll have the member name and then a description of the organization. And to the question that came from Bushra, we absolutely recognize that there are organizations that serve more than just the South Asian population, but perhaps their history or their origin was in the South Asian population, or there's organizations that go beyond interpersonal violence or gender-based violence, right? So and especially because that's what the communities need, right? So in that context, yes, absolutely. Organizations whose scope just as long as your scope includes culturally specific services towards South Asian community and includes services towards gender-based violence, and your mission is a part of your mission, at least part of your mission is working towards ending gender-based violence, you would be a really great member for SOAR. So that, I hope, Bushra, that answers your question, because we absolutely recognize that some organizations are more focused in terms of the community they're serving, and that's typically in larger cities that have the ability to do that. And then there's some organizations that are like serving a larger immigrant population, and they may be, especially during COVID, meeting the needs of the community in different ways that go beyond gender-based violence. So we want to say, absolutely, you belong at SOAR because this is part of your mission. And that kind of lends itself to that intersectional lens as well, that we're recognizing that we're not in this little silo of like, you're a domestic violence victim, and you're South Asian. So it's taking all that into consideration. So in the application, we'd also ask for a high-res copy of your logo, and that is also for the website. So for those of you who have already put in your application, you recognize probably that these two questions are new, and that's because I didn't realize we needed them. So I'll reach back out to you to get those two pieces. No need to do another application or anything like that. We'd want your location and then your website, social media information if you have it, also recognizing that many of the organizations are volunteer run and smaller. So even if your social media presence isn't huge, if you have a Facebook page, if you have an Instagram, please share it with us. And that's a way that we can help capacity build. So for example, if we do social media campaigns together for, like around Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I'll pick the easiest one. And so that could be a way that we can help build capacity for all of our organizations. Your organization's phone number and a general email address, as you know, from many of you being part of this group for so long. Unfortunately, there is, there's turnover, people come back. And so this would be where you put in the way that we can always get a hold of your organization. So this wouldn't be an individual's information. It would be sort of your general, like how to contact your org. And then of course, the primary contact, that person's title and email. Again, this could be the executive director. It could be a board member for volunteer run organizations. It could be a key staff member, a program manager, whoever would. And as we go through this application and you look at the website, maybe you'll get a better feel of like who the right person is to be the primary contact and that person's title and email. For those of you who can and have the ability to do so, again, want to really acknowledge capacity of organizations. If there is a secondary contact, adding them here is also an option too. And again, when you think about joining SOAR as an organization, please know that you don't have to have just one person joining. My wish is to have each member of DAIA join and be involved in SOAR, and that's okay. You can have like all 10 or 20 or 2 of your staff members join as contacts, but you as a member, the membership is with the organization, if that makes sense. Amrita, are there any questions coming up about that as I just babbled my way through that and maybe confused people?
Not about that. There was just one about if there's a review period, and I just responded saying we will have a review period, but it's not meant to reject anyone's membership. It's just
Good. That's exactly right. So we're just going to review. Basically, the review period is making sure that we have all of your information so that as we add to the website and as we add to the listserv and communications and shared drives, that we have the right people on there. So the review period is really just making sure that we're not missing anything from you.
Yep. And then there's 2 more questions that just came in. Are we allowed to forward to organizations that we feel might be interested and fall within the criteria?
Oh my gosh, please. That's an emphatic yes.
And then Secondly, is it one application per organization or an application per member of an organization?
Very good question. So ideally, it should be one application per organization. Already, some people have had to do that a little bit differently because they had like 4 people of their organization that want to be on the listserv. So I do want to clarify that it should be one application per organization, and that's really to protect y'all's time and your effort. And then once we have that primary contact, what one of us will do, whether it be, the secretary or the membership chair, however, like during that review process, what we'll do is we'll reach out to you and ask you which staff members you would like to include as part of the broader emails and communications that go out. But we definitely don't need to have, each one of your staff members or your volunteers or your board members, putting in your mission and your logo. We want to keep this as straightforward for y'all as possible. Okay, and then Amrita, just keep interrupting me with questions that you see.
Okay.
So if your primary contact and secondary contact are not your ED or your board president, which can be the case, if you would just include that person's name and email here, the purpose behind that is that we completely recognize that there are organizations, especially some that we talked about, that are doing kind of broader services that the ED or the board president may not be able to be the primary contact. And that's okay. All we want to know is that the organizational's leadership is behind the mission, the vision, and the values of SOAR. So that's the reason for this question here. And then, so I'll pause. Any questions on contacts and names that we're collecting? Okay, cool. And please, apologies for my pauses are usually really short. So again, interrupt me at any time. So here's the part of the application that might look like something that you could just like quickly read through and check on, but we ask that you don't do that. We ask that you take this application to your key leadership. So whether, and every organization looks different, right? So whether that is your leadership team, whether that's your full staff, whether that's a board of directors, whatever that looks like. What we want to know is that every organization that is applying to be a member of SOAR, we think the more, the merrier, the stronger we are, but we want to know that we are all in alignment with the mission and the vision and the values. And that is probably the most important thing about this application. So while these look like just check boxes that you can easily just go through, we ask that when you're looking through these, that you're actually taking them to the key leadership of your organization, so that we know that leadership, that there's buy-in, right? So making sure that everyone is in alignment with the mission. And when we think about being survivor centered, looking at the entire South Asian diaspora, and looking at equitable and alternative paths to justice, right? So some of those things that kind of, I'll give an example from my own board. People asked, like, what does that mean? What does alternative paths to justice mean? And we talked about it. We said, sometimes the criminal justice system doesn't work for the survivors that we are working with. Sometimes the legal system lets us down. And so are those the only pathways that we're looking at? For some folks, maybe they are grant funded to where they are limited to some of those pathways, but are you open to the idea of there being alternative pathways out there? So again, just a buy-in around the mission. Same thing with the vision, and I know many of the organizations on here today, and so I know that you all are in line here, but making sure your whole your leadership team and your whole teams are behind this mission and this vision. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into the guiding principles, and again, feel free to interrupt me at any time if questions come up. Being survivor centric, I know this is something that many of our organizations are already committed to. So making sure that that's a reality in your organization and the way in which you deliver services, right? So we want to really hold ourselves accountable to the idea that survivor voices are what is leading our work, that we are that survivors are the ones that will ultimately restore their power, and that is that's a value that's extremely important to us, and I think that's why it is the very top principle there. Intersectionality being our second one, and I think this is where there's been some questions and great conversation. But ultimately, I think through our work, we know that there is no one image of a survivor, and there is not just one pathway to healing or to justice. So we want to be sure that we, even if our services can't offer as many options and choices and aren't open to as many types of survivors and images of survivors that we want to be, the acknowledgement that that is out there, regardless of class or race or caste or age, gender being a big one, right? So again, going back to what Aparna talked about, moving from the SOAR mentality to something that's around survivors and all of their many identities and the ways that they live and love and identify. Language. So all of these things, and this isn't to say that if you're an organization that at this point has a capacity to only serve women, that you have to now open up and serve people of all gender identities. Or if that's part of your mission and you don't see that changing, also that's okay. That doesn't mean that you don't belong at SOAR, but we want to have you commit to the fact that there are other identities of survivors, and that people of all backgrounds and all identities can be survivors. So any questions around that came up during the chat? So again, this is more about beliefs than it is around what your services actually can provide. Collaboration and solidarity. I know we have done a great job of this in the past. We believe that we are just stronger together, right? And that our foundation is really that idea of family that both Amrita and Aparna have spoken to, and that family that we have, this family that we have on this call here, 40 strong, is founded in safety and in trust and respect and accountability for each other, and that we are here to uplift one another's work, but also nurture each other, right? So it is about exchanging resources and exchanging knowledge. And I think even through this like application process, how much have we all learned and shared different policies and procedures? So it's about really solidifying that and formalizing the sharing of those materials that can only make us, all of our organizations, and so our broader movement, stronger as well. So again, I'd like to make note to the last sentence here. So while our approaches may vary, we want to really stay true to that. We recognize that everyone is working in different communities, some in very small towns, some in big cities, some in the South, some in the Northeast. Every community needs something different, and our approaches vary to that. And I think what makes us so strong is that we are so flexible and bendable to what our communities need. We don't want to take that away from anyone. We all live with our identities, and our identities are really important organizational identities, but that our goals are unified. So we are committed to centering the historically oppressed in this broader movement towards equality. So it may not be, not everyone's mission is going to look the same, not everyone's services, and definitely not everyone's approaches, but that at the end of the day, we are here collaborating to create a movement towards equality for survivors. The next principle is love and respect. Probably my favorite one, though I don't know who worded this, but I love it. It wasn't me. I'm not going to take credit for it. I love what it says here, is that our radical imagination pushes us towards a world that honors and centers love, compassion, respect, and vulnerability. I've done, I think like with the racial justice movements that have been happening, especially this year, I've been able to do such great reading, and so many of things that I've read have come from people on this call. And what I've learned is that a lot of organizations, a lot of the structures in which we have to work, were really made and created by people that don't look like us and are not survivors. And so our goal here is to root this collaborative in love and in compassion and in those things that survivors need, and that can set us apart, right? So and that includes, you know, our failures and our evolutions and the mistakes we make as well. So this is definitely one of my favorite guiding principles, is the idea that we can have vulnerability with each other, to have questions, to make mistakes, to perhaps do things wrong at times. My gosh, I know I have. And then to be able to call on each other for mentorship, for somebody to lean on, and in a very real way, right? So I know we lean on each other as friends, but this can be a collaboration that we can lean on each other in a very professional and official way, to where we can support each other's organizations, and that we don't see organizations go under, right? So I think one of the things, especially that COVID has shown us, is that funding is hard, that foundations are looking at things differently, that government funding is difficult, that there are funding cuts, that people are donating less. And how can we help each other, right? And so that's what this guiding principle is about. And then finally, the guiding principle of innovation. So again, what I was talking about, like all of these institutions, all of these organizational concepts, so much of the ways in which we have to work was created by people who are not us, right? So many of this is about efficiency, and it can be very binary, and there's a lot of like fear, and we do a lot of there's a lot of scarcity mentality as well, right? So we want to move away from that and really shift away from that pathway into one towards connection. And how can we connect to then make all of our organizations thrive through empathy, even through disagreement, which is part of collaboration, right? And experimentation. So trying great things, that these alternative pathways to healing and justice, like trying things and then sharing with each other in a really honest and vulnerable way, being really transparent about what is working and what is really transforming our movement. And we want to do this with each other, but we also want to do it with our funders as well. So again, this idea that some organizations are bigger than others, have more, you know, have more like manpower, right, behind us, but where can we help smaller organizations be able to innovate the same way and take some of those really fun risks, right? And I'm not being I'm not being facetious there. I think taking risks is fun, but we do so with a mindset of abundance and unlearning that scarcity mentality that I was talking about. So with that, any questions on values?
A couple questions came up, and if anyone wants to unmute, feel free to share out loud. But
yeah, that too. Yes.
I'll just share them out loud. What are some ways collaborations of organizations have worked in the past? I think it'd be great to hear, like, even if anyone else wants to share. And there were already some people sharing in the chat. And then the second one, do any groups consider lobbying with municipal, state officials, and legislators?
Yeah, so just to speak to the first one a little bit, I don't know, is Darlene, are you on the call? Sorry to call you out. I don't know if she's on the call. Darlene, are you there?
I am. Yeah, I'm here.
Can you talk a little bit about what we did in Texas? My gosh, I guess 2 years ago now?
Sure. It was so magical. It started with Rachna and I running into one another at the executive director conference for our statewide family violence coalition. And we just said we have to get together and get our whole organizations together. I know we have common needs, pain points, hopes, ambitions. And so Rachna and I just planned to get our teams together, and we invited, and I see Texas Muslim Women's Foundation, Mona was present, and Awaz from San Antonio, and Daya. We got together for an evening kickoff dinner where our whole teams had fellowship and social time together on a Sunday evening, and then spent a day in small groups identifying needs, issues, resources, challenges, and we hired a facilitator, and we had the support. I know API GBV is on the line. Chick Dabby came, and our two statewide family violence and sexual violence coalition leaders came and joined us and offered some funding for us to have lunch and hire a facilitator. And we emerged with a document of common goals that we can continue to build on. And so we're just super excited. I think that there's so much potential in serving clients together and using our very limited resources to bolster each other's impact and power in our regions. And I'm just so thrilled and excited. It was so valuable.
Yeah, so I will say, like, that's what we did in Texas, and that was a collaboration that was so great because it did bring funding to each of our organizations from some of the coalitions that were involved and supporting after the fact. And it also, like, we talk about warm referrals, and now, like, having our teams coalesce and like really meet each other, those warm referrals happen in like such a fantastic way. And I'll say, especially working with Texas Muslim Women's Foundation, who has just such a fantastic culturally specific shelter, being able to have those warm referrals there is letting us help so many more survivors flee from Houston to Dallas, right? So that's just one example that we did in Texas. I open up to anyone else to talk about previous collaborations too.
I just want to share my gratitude to Rachna and Darlene and Aparna for such collaboration, and of course Sarah. So I love you all, and we will do what we need to do. So our work has to be in together. We have to work this together. And also, I think to what Rachna is saying, we've had some major clients literally fleeing from one city to another and major collaboration. I think that, and these are survivors that needed help. So amazing work. Thank you all. I love you all.
Mona, it's so great to have you. And then there was the second question, Amrita, was about policy work. Is that right?
Yes. Trying to find it. Do any groups consider lobbying with municipal, state officials and legislators? And I think a few people have also been responding to that in the chat and ways that they've done that.
I don't have an answer for that. So if anyone wants to pop in, that would be great.
You're muted.
A lot of what we've done, I mean, I don't know how many of you know about this, but there's the H4 EAD, and a lot of us have come together to have informational sessions, not so much lobbying, but definitely advocating for regulations, advocating for these laws. In fact, I might be getting in touch with y'all because I think they're trying to, some folks are reaching out to me about an expansion of like non-immigrant visa relief. So if that comes out, I'm going to email y'all. But there's definitely areas where we can have a strong voice, and we have definitely put out that reality. I think the other piece is, like, if we're doing this work, how do we engage our communities and how can we do it collectively? And I just think there's a lot of power in us doing this together. But we've done stuff around H4s. We've definitely done statements. We have been on conversations about immigration and immigration relief. So I think there's always the opportunity, as our community is changing, for us to do some of the policy, but also learn from each other. Like, what's happening in Texas might be really great for us to kind of say, hey, let's get a sample of this and do this in Georgia. So again, more power with all of us together.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the learning part, because that's an area that, I mean, I say it all the time, self-admittedly, I know very, very little about. And so I'm always learning from Darlene on the Texas side, because she's so great at, like, she's there in the Capitol, she's got her finger on the pulse of it. And that's who I learn from. Like, it's I don't have to like read all these things. It's like I hop on the phone with my friend Darlene, and so that's much easier. So, and then we do think too that many of us are limited in the amount of policy work that we can do within our own like direct service agencies. And so this is an opportunity to do that work on a national scale in a stronger, more freeing way, right? So there's that too.
I'm going to say that obviously we're not South Asian specific, but we do policy advocacy at the, I mean, that's why we have Grace sitting in everywhere. So we're more than happy to help and work through, but it has to have an API lens, but that doesn't mean that she can't talk to you about the South Asian piece.
Yeah, yeah.
And we
Again,
do
there,
bug.
yeah,
We
that,
have bugged Grace many times for stuff that we need support on. And don't y'all have a call at 3 p.m. today, Sarah Khan?
I'm doing the one tomorrow.
Okay, but there is one today. Isn't there one today on immigration?
Oh, you mean the webinar? Yes.
There's a webinar on immigration today.
Yes. I thought you were talking about meeting with the task force. Sorry.
Oh, that I don't even know about that one, but
and so again, to Sarah's point, you know, even if you're, and you know, for example, AFSA in Austin serves the broader Pan Asian community because they are the only ones in Austin, right? So I still, you know, I want to keep uplifting that fact that whether you are, you know, the super focused lens or whether you've gone broader, we recognize that is to meet the needs of the communities that you're in, but that if the South Asian focus is part of your work, that SOAR is a great fit for you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, because that was my question, going to be my question. So following up on Sarah, great to know. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. I just want to move on to the following initiatives that we've loosely defined for the next 3 years. Of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so you know things change as we've learned. But some of the initiatives that we have are looking into for the next 3 years is fundraising and development for SOAR as an organization, and also for capacity building for organizations that are members of SOAR. So there's that piece of it. Then there's the national policy advocacy, which we talked about, strengthening and building up the SOAR coalition structure. As you can probably tell, and we'll talk about a bit more, there isn't, you know, nothing is super set in stone in terms of structure. And that's one of the goals, is to talk to the members and see what people feel is right and what people need. Looking at data and national trends, as Amrita mentioned, this is so important because what we're finding is that funding is so related to telling the stories of our survivors and also showing the need that we all see. But if I'm only talking about the numbers that I'm seeing in Houston, or someone's only, if Kavita's talking about the numbers that she sees at Saki in New York City, those aren't going to tell as strong of a story as if we're bringing all of that together. So the idea of bringing data together and talking about the national trends we're seeing. Nusrat really wanted me to bring up forced marriage. I told her I would put it in there. I told her I would definitely bring it in there, but she always says that the initiatives and the work that's been done around forced marriage could have never been done if it weren't for all of the organizations coming together and saying this is real. These are trends that we're seeing, and the same for transnational abandonment as well. And again, what Aparna was talking about around visas as too. And then finally, capacity building and resource sharing. By the way, when you fill out this application, these will be totally written out. This is because I'm in my edit mode. So building capacity for each other's organizations and sharing our resources. Man, I hate doing things from scratch. And if I can just take what's already existing, what already works for somebody, and then sort of format it to work for the work that we're doing in Houston at Daya, how much time does that save? So part of resource sharing is it allows us to build capacity, and then it allows us to all be operating under best practices. One of the things that Daya has done with Chetna is combine all of our educational presentations. So when we do like a DV 101 to a mosque or a temple, we're giving the same presentation. So whether you're hearing that in Dallas or whether you're hearing that in Houston, you're hearing the same sort of ideas and best practices. So that's just another example of where resource sharing is so helpful. So here we just ask you to rank your top 3 interests. And this is just around gaining an idea of where people might fit really well within committees. And then we also want to know if there's any initiatives that you're just completely uninterested in or disagree with. This isn't to say that, oh, I'm not at all interested in, resource sharing. So if for some reason you're part of an organization where all of your policies, procedures, materials are all like that, you guys keep those closed, that doesn't mean you can't be a member of SOAR, but we would just want to know that that's not something of interest to you, so that look at me segueing, so that we know sort of which committees would be the best for your organization or your members to be a part of. So here we would ask you to rank your interests rank which committees you're most interested in. So there's communications, there's member relations, data and trends, resource sharing, survivor involvement, fundraising, and policy and advocacy. So these are the committees that we've defined. Members are highly encouraged to join a committee, and this is at the person level, right? So if again, I'll give Nusrat as my example. She'll love watching this recording later, but I know that Nusrat is super, super passionate about policy and advocacy. So that would be a great space for her. And, whereas maybe our client services director, she's really into like data and trends. And so that would probably be a good place for her. So for this, we would just want to know the person filling out the application, if you could kind of rank envision kind of the members that you see from your staff, who's going to be involved in SOAR, and maybe ask their interest here. This is not final. We just kind of want to know where people's interest lies. And of course, if there's a place where we find no one has any interest at all, then we would likely want to rethink that as a committee. So this is not you signing up for a committee. This is just you saying here's my interest level in these various activities. We are also interested in people holding an executive committee position. So being on what we're calling the advisory board, which is a chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and or leading one of these committees. So if you're interested in that level of involvement, or if anyone from your team is, we would want to know who that is, so that we can quickly call you and tell you, yes, we want you to do that. So this is also highly encouraged. And then finally, in our last couple of minutes, I want to go through what we really see are the membership benefits. And we would want in the application for you guys to, you don't necessarily, I know that you might be excited about all of them, but we really do want to know what is exciting you guys most, what's driving your organization to apply for SOAR. So the different membership benefits, I won't go through all of them, but I will talk about some of my favorites, which of course is the connection and community building on a national platform. And the shared resources are just incredibly valuable. And then of course, warm referrals, which we see so much of. COVID is bringing a bigger need to this capacity building, and also for providing mentorship and receiving mentorship. So that's I'll just highlight some of them. I'll ask if any of the other, if anyone else on the call after we finish up this application want to go through some of these membership benefits. But really, I think coming together, we are just so much stronger together and providing support for each other, including self-care, and then potential funding opportunities too to help build capacity. So when we think about those opportunities, we are thinking of them ideally as general operating support, because we know that at any time, I'm not going to just say during COVID, but at any given moment, that general operating support is just incredibly powerful for our organizations that do this work. And then finally, at the bottom of the form, you are again agreeing that you have gone through these things with your teams, whether that is your leadership, whether that's your board or your staff. I did it with both because it just gets people really excited. And with that, and right at 1 o'clock, I will 1:00 my time. Oh no, so it's here now. I see her. I will stop and open it up for questions if there are any, or comments. And if y'all are comfortable, I can stop the recording now so people can just share their thoughts or questions very freely in this group.